Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Art of Cyber Insurance, what's new in coverage and claims. You've picked the sexiest topic this afternoon to hear about. I trust, I promise this will be an entertaining discussion. My name is Chris Susing. I'm a partner with the law firm of Woodsmith, Henning & Berman. I lead our firm's national cybersecurity and data privacy practice group. I work with clients through data breach events, ransomware attacks, claims that arise after attacks, as well as privacy compliance with clients. And I will have my esteemed panel introduce themselves, starting with Monique.
Hi, I'm Monique Ferraro. I'm cyber counsel with Hartford Steam Boiler. We are a major reinsurer of cyber, and you may know us better for being an equipment breakdown insurer.
Hi guys, I'm Peter Hedberg. I'm on the senior underwriting team at Corvus Insurance. I was an agent broker for 10 years, and then I've been underwriting for the last 10 years. I'm based out of Washington, and we were bought by Travelers in January. More to come on that.
Hi, I'm Violet Sullivan. I am a cyber privacy attorney turned insurance. I work as the head of cyber solutions for Crum and Forrester Insurance. It's basically telling people I'm not inside security. I'm actually helping security for all our outside policyholders. So I get to give a lot of different advice instead of just one straight internal core. I'm also professor of cybersecurity and privacy law at Baylor Law School.
I'm also not a lawyer. I'm safe.
Yeah, you're safe.
Yeah,
Okay.
he says.
As you may have heard, I believe through most of the sessions here, all the companies, the firms that you've heard that we're here on behalf of, we are not representing their opinions necessarily, their positions, so we're just here speaking to you guys personally, so don't hold it against us. The agenda for today. We're going to hopefully give you a nice overview of the current cyber insurance landscape, especially because there is no universal or standard forms for cyber insurance, as well as some of the newer coverages that will be that have been starting to be rolled out and are being contemplated to roll out over the next year or so. Coverage issues. Again, we're not going to be litigating coverage issues up here, but there are certainly some hot topics that have been out there and have starting to come through the courts and through some of the cyber carriers. Claims activity will give you an overview of the most common claims we're seeing coming through cyber insurance, as well as the types of coverages that arises because those claims. And finally, some best practices and some tips to prepare your house in order to actually apply for cyber insurance. So I guess with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pete to start off. If you could kind of level set, give us a little background as to the current state of cyber insurance.
Yeah, so this product is probably 20, 25 years old. I would say in its current maturity, though, it has sort of normalized over the last 5 to 10 years. It is an interesting coverage in that it's first and third party. When I say first party, that's an insurance policy that pays you for your loss. The third party pays you to defend yourself against a third party and pays that third party if there is a judgment against you in that regard. So a little bit of a happy meal policy. There's a lot going on. It'll cover for cyber attacks. It triggers immediately upon that. Data breach, this also includes, there's a third party element to the data breach, like paying out notification costs and that sort of thing. Fraudulent funds transfer, kind of the orphan baby of cyber right now. We're currently affirmatively covering a lot of funds transfer stuff that is induced through deception or other sort of cyber vectors. Media liability, copyright, trademark, things that you can be held liable for from an intellectual property. There is a limitation there. We don't cover patent. Business interruption, contingent business interruption. We'll have a long discussion about this, but the business interruption is just like your property insurance. It's going to pay you lost income if your revenue flow is interrupted by a cyber event. And then privacy laws, obviously they've been multiplying, and we'll get into it later in the discussion, but there's a lot of what I call zombie litigation where old laws are being used now against. So there's a defense component and a damages component there.
And one of the things that I don't think I realized until I was in insurance a little bit is that first party and third party, we say those phrases over and over and over, so we know what they mean. But when he says first party are the original expenses that you incur, he means like the forensics cost, right? The cost to set up a call center, the cost to, pull together legal counsel.
Or pay the
Those
ransom.
or pay the ransom, right? Or pay the wire transfer that, reimburse the wire transfer if it gets sent to a client or something like that, does not get sent to a client. And then the third party, I always think lawsuits, right? Lawsuits, regulators, that's defending, well, actually regulators are first.
Regulators are
First party.
first, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I'm still learning. But the third party is going to be defending the cost of defending against the lawsuit, like you said. I just feel like it needs to be a little bit more broken down.
Reinsurers love us.
All right,
We
so that's a
do.
good kind of baseline, I think, for a lot of the common coverages. And then now we see some through endorsements. So if you want to kind of run
Yeah,
through some
I'll
of the more
just cook
important
through
ones.
these. So I would say in the last 5 years, these have become somewhat standard, but these are enhancements to the coverage. You guys certainly can bring these up with your agent. System failure is a failure of your system that causes some sort of business interruption, but was not caused by a hack or other malicious event necessarily.
Does anyone not know what endorsements mean? Okay, you
They're
got it.
they're just changes to the policy, right?
Everybody's got auto policies, right?
Contingent business interruption and system failure, that's where they allow the business interruption to trigger based on a system failure. Voluntary notification, so sometimes you might have a gray event where you're not sure whether you should let people know there's been a breach. The voluntary notification will give you a little bit of a fund to go ahead and do that proactively if it might mean preventing a claim further down the line. Betterment is when you are going to go ahead and replace systems. In a lot of cases, this includes just virtualization because we still do have claims where people have on-prem infrastructure. The betterment allows the policy to pay for newer equipment and not get constrained by the typical replacement language that's in a lot of policies.
I always think of betterment as, say you're running XP and you have, an event. You don't want to reinstall XP, right? You want to bump it up a little bit.
We don't want you
It's
to
in-
reinstall it.
Yeah, it's in your best interest. It's in our best interest. Everybody's better off.
Yep. But because the principle of insurance is indemnity, which is to leave you where you were before the accident, that's why there's that's why that exists. SCADA coverage, obviously for system operational devices, there can be separate coverage set aside to replace those components. Property damage and spoilage, think HVAC, think you're running a gigantic refrigeration for, a meat locker, and a cyber event takes the refrigeration systems offline. All of a sudden, you've got a bunch of bad beef. There might be some coverage there. Failure to supply, that's a really, really niche one, but if you're a utility company, you're gonna know what that is. And then contingent business interruption. This is downstream impact to you. You weren't attacked, but one of your suppliers, vendors, or somebody else that you have a contract. Think like ADP, right? If they handle your payroll, they get attacked, you can't make payroll. That's what that is gonna trigger that.
Change healthcare.
Yeah, and to be
Thanks for
clear,
bringing
I'm the
that up.
first
Yeah.
one who said it.
so what P was just describing about coverages and some of these additional ones through endorsement, again, to be clear, these are not universal among every cyber insurance policy. These are possibilities of coverage out there. So when you are shopping either through your broker or yourself for various policies, just be aware of what can be available out there because they can vary pretty widely.
Even the
certainly.
prior slide isn't universal because a lot of, the different insurance policies might vary also on the collection of data. Wrongful collection might be excluded by some. We include wrongful collection as a coverage. I think there's really no one size fits all when you have cyber insurance. So it's really good to have a good broker that can compare and explain the policies and the coverages with you.
Yeah,
Very important.
just as like a level set, when your CFO is buying insurance, the general liability, the property, the auto, those are all standardized language throughout the entire industry. They can buy various enhancements or changes to that or whatever. These products are not standardized. Every insurance company has their own wording. They think they're doing it the best way, yada, yada. That's emphasis on having a good broker because they have to sift through all that for you and do what they think is best for you.
And there's not existing case law that really breaks down what the word and means or of or the. So in cyber, we're all kind of figuring it out as we go along. And we've seen, like with litigation after Sony, we didn't figure out until 5 to 7 years later after Sony happened what the policy was being interpreted as. And there's still going to be litigation after any big incident. The point of you emphasizing the different coverages is that you want to make sure that it applies to your specific risk posture.
Case in point, if you want to go down a really deep rabbit hole, you can read the case law on 9/11. Was that one event or two?
And, see, and give attorneys a little bit more time. We'll bring plenty of litigation to iron all this stuff out, right? Now, as I mentioned also, if you have questions going through this, please write them down, and then we'll leave a time at the end for you to come up to the microphones, because certainly things come up as we go through, I think, some dense information here. But kind of shifting gears a little bit now, Monique, we've talked about the coverages that are available on the market out there through various cyber carriers. Now, if you could just kind of walk through, what are the expenses? What could a client expect to be covered if they have cyber insurance?
You could expect, as Violet summarized, you didn't expect that your legal counsel is going to be paid for. Yeah, the cost of notification in the event that you have a data breach, the investigation by digital forensics, investigation and response, your media, your crisis communications people. That's most of the first party expenses, the regulatory investigations, the fines, the penalties. If you're a merchant, your PCI investigation, the assessments and penalties. It depends. You really have to read the policy in order to know exactly what's covered. But if you have a good attorney, they're going to either argue, hey, the assessments are really, assessments, they really are this, right? So all of that is negotiable. When you have a good attorney, everything's negotiable, right? And under third party, as Violet and Pete mentioned, that's the defense if you are sued, and the settlement, any verdict costs for the attorney and for the court costs as well.
Yeah.
No,
go for it.
From the security perspective, I think it's really important to realize that this is one of the many tools in your toolbox. Getting insurance is not, and we've had questions before, like, is it admitting defeat to get insurance? There's a lot of different perspectives. It's just one of those ways to transfer risk. So when you think about accepting risk, mitigating risk, transfer risk, this is just like your vendor management contracts. You're creating this parachute behind you so that you can focus on the other things. And I think one of the reasons it's so important to read your policy is to make sure it aligns with the rest of the ways that you're addressing risk. So if you are going through and mitigating risk with these tools and these tool sets, these policies and procedures, your administrative, physical, and technical safeguards, this is just one piece of that, and you want to make sure that it actually calls to where you think you might be weak or strong, right? What you need or don't need. It's got to align with your security policy, and it's a reason that I'm going to take your PSA is that you don't want CFO just signing everything up. You want to be very actively involved in what is on that paper, just like you are in vendor agreements, just like you're asking for, audit rights or transparency or notification from vendors that touch your systems and your data and have access. You want to have the same impact and seat at the table for insurance.
And some of the major benefits that you get that come along with the cyber insurance policy are the services that come along with it. First of all, you have panels that have been pre-approved by the insurer that have all of these service providers pre-identified and ready to respond to your incident whenever it may occur. You also get substantial discounts and pre-vetted pre-incident services, and that is invaluable, and it reduces your costs. Your overall security budget is definitely supplemented, and could, in at least for our policies, some of the value that we provide for free is definitely equal to the policy premium.
And one of the first calls that you should be making after you find out from your broker which cyber insurance policy you have to cover an event is to breach counsel, and that's not just for self-preservation and job security. It is so that we can then go and retain all of these vendors on your behalf and maintain privilege throughout. So we keep the entire investigation confidential and privileged so that as needed we can share that information later. However, if you just run and retain forensics, if you go and run and retain crisis communications without counsel involved, and I don't mean general counsel or in-house counsel, I mean your breach counsel outside, then there might not be any confidentiality or privileged that could cloak that entire investigation. Again, not necessarily hiding anything, it's more of just protecting you and being able to talk as transparently as possible with your vendors.
We actually saw that with Capital One. I don't know how many people follow that case, but it was very strong inclination that the court saw that their same provider, the same technical resource, was used before breach, and then they used the same person after breach. Not to say you can't do that, but they did not change their hats or bring in someone that said this is for the purpose of litigation. So it seemed like it was a continuation of the same technical
Agreement.
support.
It was the same agreement.
It was the same agreement.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So they didn't have a new contract, right?
Yeah.
So privilege didn't attach, and that's critical. But if you have a good breach coach, they're going to advise you about that, and they're going to be familiar with what can be privileged, what they should do to ensure privilege as best they can, and advise you also, hey, if you insist on having a report, it may or may not be privileged at the end of the day. It may, the court may, if you get sued, force you to disclose this. But, your litigation counsel can definitely try to keep it out of the public eye at least, because we're all sensitive, who work in this field, to how confidential that information is, and if it gets out into the public, you don't want people knowing what controls you had in place before the event, what controls were circumvented during the event, and then what you did to remediate afterward, by implementing new controls. So you don't want everybody and their brother to know about that, because it provides a clear roadmap to your next breach, right? So it's very important to have, very qualified, pre-vetted vendors on your team.
And from the claim side, when you start the investigation, no one really knows how bad is this going to get, right? There's a lot of twists and turns throughout investigation. So when you first get in, that's why they say bring in breach counsel first, because you don't know what you're going to have to defend. And what I've learned through 10 years of tabletops is the way that a technical person thinks and a legal person thinks, they're very different. Technical thinks of hypothetical. What could go wrong? Let me throw out all the worst case scenarios and let's go through each of them. You know what legal hears when they hear that? Please don't say that out loud. Think it in your head. Don't write it down. We'll talk through it. But they don't. They think a little bit differently about protecting you from your own investigation, the way that your team collaborates and works together. You want that to be a sacred place so that you can be really efficient and good at stopping the problem, and also thinking about that worst case scenario to stop the problem.
Yeah, and a good example of the different thinking is, when you have an incident, somebody is going to probably say in one of the meetings, we had a data breach. What? That's like a 4-letter word in this business. Because when you start talking about data breach, you mentioned those 2 words, then the whole reporting requirements, the clock starts running, and in some cases it's a 72-hour notification timeline, and the notification timelines differ by jurisdiction, as I'm sure that Chris can tell you in great detail.
Right, so all that legal analysis and evaluation that we work hand in hand with you, your client, and with the vendors to provide that analysis as we go through the breach. We've talked about what the coverages are. Now let's get into maybe a little more dicier territory. It was typically may not be covered. So I don't know, Monique, if you want to kick off some of these coverages that may not be through cyber insurance. But again, none of them are speaking necessarily on behalf of their carrier. So go for it.
So any criminal activity on your part is not going to be covered. So actively engaging in criminal behavior such as wiretapping, which is what is claimed in many of these privacy and tracking web tracking lawsuits. So if it's wiretapping in a jurisdiction where that is brought, it's not going to be covered by your insurer, because if you like employed the real-time acquisition of a wire communication, which arguably web tracking software is, and you didn't provide notice, which was voluntarily and knowingly acknowledged and consented to by the end user, then that's a pretty good argument for being criminal activity. There's also war-related damages. The war exclusion has gotten a lot of play in the media. The Mondelez case following the NotPetya attacks in 2017, there was the Mondelez case and there was the Merck case. Those were not cyber insurance policies, but they did signal to us in the insurance industry that we needed to address war exclusions as they apply to cyber incidents. And if you have questions about that and how it applies, we can talk about that in the question and answer period or afterward. Failure to patch, not having an appropriate patch cadence, ignoring critical vulnerabilities, especially there's an increasing number of insurance techs that operate in the cyberspace, such as Corvus, that will tell you, they're monitoring you constantly, and they will tell you, hey, you need to patch this. And if you don't patch it within a certain amount of time, they can deny a claim, right? Biometric privacy violations are increasingly being excluded from cyber policies just because of the magnitude of the verdict in the first case that got before the court. And also, there are many companies in the United States that aren't really aware of the consequences and the potential liability involved in the biometric privacy violation sphere, right? So, they say, oh yeah, it's a great idea to have your employees, scan their retinas when they come through the door, their fingerprints. Well, if you don't have their voluntary and knowing consent, you can be looking at like an enormous judgment for that, and insurers, it's just not viable for us to insure that.
Yeah, so we're seeing biometric. The main class of business we're seeing that with is manufacturing right now, especially where you need to use some sort of biometric to key into clean manufacturing floors or confidential areas or that sort of thing. Specifically, there's a law in Illinois that has very punitive scheduled damages built into it for violations of this that we've been fighting.
And a private cause of action that goes along with it.
Yeah, exactly. So, and private causes of action are really, really favorable to class actions when you find an intrepid attorney that's willing to put it all together. One other one, the bottom bullet there, the unsavory data practices. This is just a quick PSA for everybody, especially if you're in healthcare. You probably hired a marketing company to build a website. The marketing company probably turned pixel tracking on. You probably don't know it yet. There has been some very successful plaintiff litigation going after pixel tracking software and tying that to health records based on IP addresses and who's logged in and cookies and that sort of thing. And like I said, it's been very successful so far.
And they're picking on not just pixels, the web beacons, they're picking on legitimate things that help the internet connect and work. But they're picking on it because legal and marketing haven't talked. And so the information that's being taken, they're even saying IP addresses and connected with timing, keystrokes, all of the things, the keyloggers that might be ingrained into the surveillance technology, that is not being, like the person entering that information did not give consent. And so they're filing huge lawsuits, and even if there's no basis for it, it still costs money to make a settlement or defend against a baseless lawsuit. We don't have good rulings yet from judges saying, stop filing these stupid lawsuits. We need more rulings like that, but we don't.
Yeah, they're all baseless, but we'll move on from that.
None of you
Spoke
meant
to
any
like
harm
defense
doing
attorney.
it. It just costs a lot of money to prove that you didn't mean any harm doing it.
I think one of the most frustrating things about the surveillance technology litigation happening is that anyone in security can be doing amazing job right now. But then you got legal and marketing over here that haven't talked in 2 years. They're the ones that are making a problem pre-breach. So you don't even have to have a breach to get sued for pixel litigation or any kind of surveillance. It could be, especially healthcare needs to be thinking about this because it's very much a part of the portals that you have, right? The health information, diagnosis, prescriptions, all of that stuff. That is, I think, as a security person, really frustrating is that I can keep preventing against a data breach and a cyber incident all day, but you can't even get the things written on paper that you need to get consent from your users. Because all it takes, it's not like once you get consent and once you're able to prove consent, that's your defense. Is like we told them we were going to use it and send it to Facebook. Like we told them that, but it's that marketing is not telling legal that they're putting this stuff on the website, they're collecting the data, and no one's actually telling the user. So it seems really big brother when you see it on paper. It's like, oh, you were like seeing how long I was looking at each one of your items for sale on your e-commerce site. You were seeing my mouse movements, you were seeing my key logging, and it just seems a little creepy. So I understand, it, even though they're baseless lawsuits, it does seem like very big brother, why are you taking that data? And I think a lot of times we've seen that when legal asks marketing that, marketing's like, oh yeah, I forgot we were taking that. We used it for efficiency or user experience, but sometimes they don't have a good reason, and it's very simple to take that off.
Well, I think that everything that you just said is a great argument for improving collaboration and communication across, across organizations. The more matrix your organization is, hopefully the better communication you have between or among IT security, compliance, the law department, corporate communications, your
HR.
your marketing people, and human resources, at the very least. And there may be more folks involved as stakeholders that should know about this. There should be a lot of transparency about these decisions. It's not just a siloed decision by marketing. Oh yeah, we're gonna track our users or the user experience people. Oh yeah, we can use this data to X, Y, Z. Other people need to know because it can have tremendous legal implications. It can be excluded by your insurance policy if you do it and you are sued. So it's a big deal.
And I should qualify some of this discussion about the privacy claims and litigation is that we have worked with clients where they are covered by insurance. So it's not a universal exclusion. So that certainly whether it's a lawsuit or a claim that comes in arising from an alleged violation of some of these privacy laws, and they don't even have to be new privacy laws. They are literally dusting off the books of the Video Privacy Protection Act that was enacted, about 50 years ago, 40 some odd years ago.
80s.
So certainly not contemplating pixels now, but is being used as a basis for claims.
The language you want to use with your broker is you want to ask them about your policy and how it responds to wrongful collection. That's the language right now.
Right. All right, so we'll shift gears a little bit for some of the newer coverage that's out there. I think, Monique, if you want to just start off with, I know that this is near and dear to your heart.
Some of the new coverages, and this is founded by HSB, by the way, not to blow our horns. And that was a pun that was intended. We have cyber for autos now that protect against data breaches that can occur if an auto's information is hacked or compromised, if your computer system is bricked and you can't drive your car anymore. So that's one coverage. Personal cyber, your home systems protection, your refrigerator gets bricked, your garage door, somebody hacks it and it goes up and down and up and down. You can't sleep, and you need to have. Gosh, you may not think that these things are expensive, but I had to pay for a key fob for my car once, it was $3,000, you know? So these things usually have a
Should buy
smaller.
a cheaper car.
Yeah. I know, everybody tells me that. Cryptocurrency is another coverage that's new, protecting your wallets, but also covering exchanges and their practices, their privacy, and, you know, getting hacked and you know, all of their crypto getting stolen. Expanded privacy coverage, you can probably get protection for biometric privacy laws under endorsement. And everybody's working on AI. You know, like we said, it's in RAM. Everybody's trying to figure out, okay, well, what could possibly happen, you know, that's directly attributed to AI that's different from anything else, or anything that's not like almost exactly the same as hiring an incompetent employee, you know? So we are kind of struggling with that. So if you have any ideas, email me. I'm happy to interview.
I think it's also noteworthy to say that AI is going to affect every single line of insurance because it's going to affect risk. So I think from a base level, it's silly to just say it's going to impact cyber insurance because it's also going to impact E&O and D&O and property and casualty, like everything. It's going to impact every single coverage in some way because it's going to alter the way of human behavior.
Yeah, but it could, you know, and the thing about it having an impact is it can be positive.
Yeah.
Or it could be negative. You know, on the one hand, it can improve cybersecurity substantially. On the other hand, it could be used by hackers to, you know, crater entire companies. Who knows what's going to happen? And that is why you need us, because we cover your risks.
Yeah, my talk track on AI is kind of threefold, but very fast. Right now, cyber insurance is largely insuring the effects of AI as a threat vector. Whether it's large language model being used to clean up a really poorly written email by, you know, somebody outside of the United States who's sending something in, or whether it's actually AI, you know, trying to identify 0 days in base code for some of the most popular software that everybody's using, that sort of thing. Those are triggers. There's not a lot of markets that I'm aware of that are excluding AI.
I don't think there's any.
As a cause of loss. I mean, it's just a new threat, and what is frustrating for us is we don't know how to underwrite to it yet. That said, the best defense against AI, unfortunately, is AI. This is a fight fire with fire situation. So we're using AI on our side right now for threat vector analysis and basically trying to have it tell us the future and where things are going. So more to come on that, but it is right. It's a global change for everybody.
I also think two of the interesting things I think to apply AI, one, to the biometric that you mentioned. Just the last couple of days, I think it hit the news that El Salvador had one of what they're calling, I guess, everything's the largest breach for somebody, right? This was the largest breach of biometric data for an entire population. That was what the news source claimed in investigation. And this is a recent thing, but one of the things that stood out to me is the biometric data that they mentioned. So there was like name, this, all the different pieces of PII, but then it was a picture. And what they said, they think the reason they said that this specific biometric breach could be more harmful is they said, wait a second, what can you use pictures for? Oh yeah, AI can take pictures and replicate the images as well as knowing the name and the birth date, you know, right? They could start trying to steal identities a little easier with more advanced technology. So that, I think it's gonna totally change kind of biometric data worries and risk, but also I think it's interesting to say, okay, when we deal with threat actors, there's oftentimes that fog of war. We always talk about it. There's sometimes hard to have attribution. We're gonna have the same issue with AI because there's gonna be some employees that don't even admit that their stupid mistake was because they looked on ChatGPT. We're gonna have similar issues of going, how do we point back, like you said, how do we point back that the reason that email from Brazil was translated in perfect English was AI. You can't prove it.
Or you use AI to try to detect AI, which is not like 100% yet.
And the administrative overhead involved in trying to track down attribution is just for the birds.
Right.
You know, it just increases costs, and what does it really give you at the end of the day? You know, okay, Joe, it was in somebody's basement, or, you know, the Russians did it, or whoever did it. Yeah, it may accrue to being able to apply an exclusion, but, you know, is it really worth it to do that much legwork unless it's patently obvious?
All right, so just finishing up real quick with some of the other maybe potentially cutting edge coverages, or whether or not they're covered, is what do we think? The actual physical bodily injury arising out of cyber attacks, is that something that cyber carriers are going to cover?
Yeah, so right now the world of property damage and bodily injury are largely with general liability and property, the kind of two big mainstays of property and casualty insurance. Cyber has largely stayed away from engaging in covering those sorts of effects because those other ones, well, those other two types of insurance are largely trying to push that back onto the cyber market too. So more to come on whether or not the cyber market fully accepts those two risks. I do, like, my company does provide a small sublimit for bodily injury. So if there is, say, a direct loss to a hospital, a patient doesn't receive meds on time because an electronic medical system went down, and they didn't service that patient in a timely manner, that sort of thing. So we've seen some examples of that. They're isolated, but that sort of thing can happen. IoT,
But those are usually covered by other forms of insurance.
Yep,
You know,
right now they are.
Yeah, until they're excluded. But,
Right.
yeah.
And then IoT, obviously, everything is internet enabled. I think we all thought that was a great idea. I think we're all realizing it wasn't a great idea now. And so there's some gaps as far as the trigger and what the property damage and the result of all that is. But yes, using everything from alarm clocks to, I think the earlier session addressed sex toys or something like that, but able to, having multiple devices being able to execute DDoS attacks and that sort of thing. So moving on.
Moving on to some of maybe the bigger issues that you guys are seeing with the cyber insurance market and coverages. I mean, we talked a little bit about the war exclusion. I think we can kind of jump over that. That could be an entirely separate session on its own. But Violet, you want to tackle any of these?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're seeing, so I work on the services side, so trying to connect all the policyholders and say, hey, you have a lot of bells and whistles and resources that come with your policy. Trying to get trust is hard, first of all, because everyone's like, well, I have my own stuff. I have all my own tools in my toolbox. But I think what's cool about privacy is there's a lot of new risk on the privacy side, and it really has been the last year and a half only that this has become a pre-breach issue, right? Pre-boom, post-boom, we used to only be worried about that. What I like about insurance is it's really being able to spread the information to a lot of its policyholders at one time. So instead of you having to go out and buy a bunch of privacy tools to be a metal detector dinging where you have wrongful collection so you can yell at legal and marketing, there are scans and resources that we can do that we're offering as privacy as a service to a lot of our policyholders. So it's not just about scans and training and phishing testing, because I'm sure you're tired of hearing about all of those resources and disqualifying those, but we're also getting into some of the bigger areas of risk that are related to the data. No one used to care about privacy until this started hitting their bank. And now it is on that side. So privacy resources, I think, is one of the ways that we're trying to combat a lot of the privacy issues on the claim side and coverage side.
I'll take the thank you. I'll take the should the insurers pay ransoms real quick. Just because I think it's really important to note, there is a ongoing trend where the good news is we're paying less ransoms. It has not reduced the amount that the claims have incurred, unfortunately, because forensics costs a lot of money, business interruption costs a lot of money. Not paying that ransom usually increases the business interruption costs because it's a more ongoing event. Here's the problem with paying a ransom. Lockbit unfortunately proved what we kind of all knew, which is they don't actually delete the data. They all keep it. There is still an argument to pay a ransom if you are a professional services company where you have a legally established duty of confidentiality to your customers. Think accountants, lawyers, doctors, that sort of thing. So they're typically still paying the ransom. A lot of it has to do with the integrity of your backups, the type of data that was exfiltrated. Oh, thank you. Having battery issues here. So all that to say, there are some circumstances where it's illegal to pay a ransom. So if you're a municipality in, say, North Carolina, which passed a state law that said, hey, no school district, no police department, no municipality, no water authority, no power utility that is publicly funded is allowed to actually pay a ransom. That's impacted us. I don't want to write cyber coverage in that state right now because that's a never-ending business interruption loss until my limit gets cooked. So just be aware that it's a public policy issue, and I don't see the government continuing to have this sort of tacit agreement that they'll look the other way while the FBI collects a little bit of data on how much the ransom was and who we paid it to. So just be aware that that's evolving right now.
And that's a good jumping off point for best practices, right? So, to avoid the necessity of paying a ransom, have good backups, test your backups, employ encryption after you have done an inventory of your data and have identified what's important for you to keep and what you can ditch, right? And then the data that you are going to keep, classify it so that you know what's PII, personally identifiable information, and personal health information so that you can silo it, you can put controls around it, right? And if it's encrypted in most states, even if it's exfiltrated, if it's encrypted, you don't have any data breach requirements. That reduces the cost of your incident substantially, right? And the whole backup exercise is very important to do because previously in a previous life I was a consultant, and something I'd ask companies is, have you tested your backups? Nobody tested their backups 15 years ago. Now if you don't test your backups on some regular cadence, that's kind of negligent, because you need to be able to recover quick, fast, in a hurry, because business interruption is what it's all about.
Yeah, and I know, so we're in our last 7 minutes right now, so we'll start taking questions. If anybody has some, you can come up to either of these two microphones. And I'll give a quick overview of the claims that we're seeing out there in terms of the status of claims, and then we'll start taking questions as well. Again, ransomware has been a very popular topic, and whether or not you're paying to actually delete the data. Again, in my experience, I'm more often than not working with the client recommending not to pay the threat actors now if it's purely just to delete the data, because if, again, the confirmation is not certain that you might actually be getting that. Again, business email compromise and fraudulent wire transfers are still really that's the meat and potatoes in terms of the number of claims that are out there. That's still the significant majority of cyber claims are the social engineering, are the wire fraud transfers, which again are being largely covered by cyber carriers, and then we can work with them as counsel. And again, supply chain attacks, we can have a whole nother session about that, but third-party supply and vendor attacks that are downstream causing claims and liability, that can also be covered by insurance. So yes, we'll start with the first question.
Yes, good morning to the moderator and to the panel. Just a question relative to insider threats. I didn't see it spoken to directly, but where you have a malicious insider who uses their privileged access for malicious intent, how is that typically covered under a policy?
Yeah, so that malicious insider does not get any sort of coverage. They will not get any sort of criminal defense. The entity, though, that is insured, the policyholder, does get defended and protected. The policy is not meant to differentiate individuals within the organization. It is meant to respond to the liability and loss of the whole organization. So yes, we still have bad actors within organizations, and that still triggers our policy.
Great.
Yeah, it goes to named insured. Your named insured is going to be the business owner, or the company itself. If it's an S corp or something. But a lot of the companies we deal with are businesses that are owned by one or a couple of owners. So if the business owner is the bad actor, you're not going to get covered, But if one of the employees is a bad actor, yes.
Okay.
We'll
All
go
right,
back and
go
forth.
for you.
So earlier you mentioned that there's a potential issue regarding a company being provided reports or information regarding how their cyber infrastructure is currently presenting. In regards to, you can prove that they decided not to patch something in this case. How does that specifically relate to something like attorney-client privilege when there, or if there is a breaching event? So I know Corvus provides those scans externally. Are those protected by attorney-client privilege? And how weird is that question to actually answer?
It's very circumstantial. I don't know if you have.
You can take.
Well, I was going to just say, from my standpoint, when you have the attorney involved, that's where, I mean, if these scans are ongoing, that's not privileged. That's not privileged. I will tell you that right now. If it's just ongoing scans and reports. But if there's some data security incident and you have an attorney involved to investigate, not just forensics, not just internal IT, that's where you have a much better chance of kind of cloaking that with privilege. But
One of the aspects of privilege is in preparation of litigation.
Right.
So if it's not in preparation of litigation, that's like a normal business activity.
It's an underwriting tool.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's no different than an application. And to your PSA earlier, please, you guys fill out the applications. Don't let your CFO do it. They do
And
not know.
don't lie.
Yeah,
Don't
then please don't lie.
yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
You'd explained that cyber insurance is more of an art than a science now. There isn't consistency in terms of the different carriers with respect to insurance. In the world of having to make decisions on investment in cyber and take into consideration the impact of those investments on your cyber insurance cost, can you give us some insight in terms of which cyber protection services are most impactful at decreasing my cyber insurance premiums?
Well, that's
Can
a
I
perfect,
give
that's a
you
perfect question.
a twofold answer? First of all, bravo by bringing the theme of the conference into your question. The art of yes, the art is possible. When you're making investments in your cybersecurity and preparing for cyber insurance, the absolute best person to discuss that with is your broker, and have a good broker to talk with about it, because they are well aware of not just the Corvus policy or the HSB policy, but all of the policies that are out there. They're going to know, what the terms and coverages are. They're going to know the premiums as well. And if there are programs that the insurers offer to reduce premium in case you, say for instance, allow the insurer to continuously monitor your systems from the inside out, from the outside in, or however they want to do the active management, right? And you may not need that if you have, sufficient cybersecurity, and if you don't have a lot of, PII and PHI that you have to protect.
Yeah, so cyber insurance is, thank you.
1 minute left.
Cyber insurance is a reactively priced product. It is not a proactively priced product. We can't see into the future to see what claims are going to be. It's based on what the claim trends have been. If claims get better, prices tend to follow that a little bit. If prices or if claims increase, then all of a sudden you see underwriting terms get tighter and you start to see premiums go up.
It's also why you've seen the trends on put MFA in place, then EDR, right? You see the buzzwords that we're catching on to. It's because it's from claims trends. We're seeing that there were more claims based on the group not having X, Y, Z, but now we're starting to see in claims full cloud backups getting lost. So it's not like we understand that it's not a one size fits all for protections, but I would say the big ones are MFA, EDR, training, phish testing. There's a lot of what I would say is it's aligned with your controls. It might not be in the exact same order. We're still, learning, but I would say we are cognizant in the insurance side that I'm trying to go fast, that if there are exceptions, it's not, if it's not enforced across the board, the exceptions are where the problems are going to happen. So we do ask, what percentage is covered by MFA? What things aren't covered by EDR? So we're starting to ask the reverse of those questions too, which I think is aligned with your security roadmap.
All right, we've come up against our time. I thank you very much all. We'll be outside if any additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.